Namaste, good afternoon. Thank you for being here. मेरो नाम मुना गुरुङ म लेख्छु अनुवाद गर्छु पढाउँछु मेरो विद्यार्थीहरू सबैलाई आऊ भनेर ज्ञानी भएर आउनु भएको छ यहाँ so thank you for being here. I teach writing at the Open Institute for Social Science अनि त्यसमाथि पनि म कथासथा भन्ने एउटा प्लेटफर्म चलाउँछु यो चाहिँ नेपाली राइटर्स र स्टोरी टेलिङलाई सपोर्ट गर्ने एउटा engine, vehicle, space ho. Ani aja चाहिँ we're so happy and honored to be organizing Smriti Ravindra's debut award-winning novel, The Woman Who Climbed Trees. अनि आजको यो लन्च चाहिँ एकदमै स्पेशल छ किनभने हामीले चाहिँ यो लन्चलाई आज नेपाल लन्च भनेर भनिरहेछौँ अनि यो सही पनि हो नेपालमा पहिलोचोटि विमोचन भइरहेछ अनि त्यसमाथि it's also a homecoming of this novel in many ways which we will speak about. Smriti has joined us here from Mumbai. She just arrived yesterday. So I'm very honored and excited to be in a conversation with her. I'll just introduce her briefly and then all of you can make the loudest noise ever and welcome Smriti to our stage. Smriti Ravindra is a Nepali-Indian writer. She's a Fulbright scholar and holds an MFA in creative writing from North Carolina State University. Her fiction has been published in the US, India, and Nepal. The Woman Who Climbed Trees is her first novel. It won the 2023 Tata Literature Live First Book Award for Fiction this year. Yes, louder. And as of yesterday, late night, it has been nominated for the Asian Prize for Fiction for 2023. Yeah, yes. It's making all sorts of waves, but the wave has hit us here today. Smriti currently lives in Mumbai, where she's a high school English teacher at the Bombay International School. Please welcome Smriti Ravindra.
Thank you. If I'm a little nervous and if I bumble, please forgive.
Thank you, Smriti. So as we said, that this is a Nepal launch, homecoming of your novel.
Yes.
How's the homecoming been for you?
Very honestly, I haven't been this nervous about my audience as I am today because I think everywhere else, you are a foreigner, your book is therefore foreign, and its lapses are not seen, not understood. But your audience and your home people know exactly what's going on in the book. They know all the liberties you've taken. They know what is accurate, what is not accurate. They actually know what is fiction and what is fact. And I think I was a little nervous about, I am, so please, kindness everywhere. But I was a little nervous, but also, this is a story that's come from Maharajganj Chakrabat, like literally, it's so set there. And to be able to share the story with people who will actually recognize it is such an honor, and it's such a privilege, so I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there are few amongst us here who know the joy of being a Chakra town girl. I share that joy for sure. I have also traveled and Luniba. Anyone else here Chakra town girls? Oh my God, look at all of us. There are so many of us. Hamro town. Yes.
I think it was the most beautiful stretch of road in the late 80s and early 90s. I don't think there was another stretch of road that was as beautiful as that one. And to see it not look like that is one of the biggest tragedies and one of Ali mutu dukha ke to see it not look like that anymore, but yeah.
So Smriti, maybe let's start from the beginning-ish, right? So we've talked about homecoming novel, we've talked about you being home after a bit here. Tell us maybe a little bit about your childhood, and through that route, maybe a little bit about what home currently means to you. Because I know your book also talks about different geographies as home. The book is set in Darbhanga, Sabaila, Janakpur, and Kathmandu. And so, yeah, if you could talk about maybe your childhood and through that route, home.
So childhood was, of course, like I said, all my childhood, most of it was in Maharajganj. So when I think of childhood, I think of a particular lane, I think of that particular stretch of time and that road. One of my childhood is standing out there. That was my childhood. And we grew up together. So for me, childhood was very much the neighborhood. But also childhood was very much my mama ghar. And mama ghar was all the way in India. And I think that was a strangely complicated part of my childhood because you know, we were the only Madhesi family in all of Ganesh Basti during the time. And it was an interesting dynamic to live through because half of me, my mom's an Indian, and my dad's a Nepali. So half of me was Indian and half of me was Nepali. And that was an interesting dynamic that played out even during my childhood, where I would get asked questions like, Janakpur ko timi Indian ho? And I think for a really long time, I didn't know the correct answer because I just didn't know the answer. I didn't understand nationality. I was too young. For me, being Nepali or being Indian meant where I live and where I spend time and whom I love. And I loved both the people. I loved my Mama Garko people. I loved people here. And so I think that was a little, I think it took me a while to understand how to respond to that question. I also have a feeling I still don't know how to respond to that question. It's a question that I still struggle with the answers about. And so in my book, I introduce myself as a Nepali Indian writer because I don't know how to introduce myself. But that being said, childhood was about ekdamai chiso winters, which are disappearing. It was about lots of land, which is also disappearing. It was about the Kathmandu, which was about paddy fields, and it was about monarchy, and it was about Chakka Banda Din, which we thought was really fun, and bida huन्थ्यो, and you know, we were like, Chakka Banda is the best day of the, you know, so it was all of that, and I think a large part of my book is drawn from my nostalgia for that childhood and for that which is lost, and the other half of my book is trying to answer, who am I? Because that's a question I've been asked repeatedly over the, I still get asked, so yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings me to my other question. I think in some of the conversations I've watched of you after the book has been out, what strikes me is you so freely sort of say, you know, yeah, I wrote from memory. I wrote a lot of this from memory. And a lot of this may have been things that you had experienced or seen or known or heard of, right? And I just wanted to bring attention to one of my favorite, actually, conversations that I watched online between this poet, Ocean Vuong, whom I love, and this other poet, Suvankam Thoma Vongsa, sorry. And in it, what Vuong talks about is how women and non-white writers fall under this gaze sometimes of creating fiction or something that you know, that is not non-fiction or not marketed as non-fiction, and being told that this must be their complete truth and their life, as though women and non-white writers are sort of exhaustible, right? Like as though you have no imagination. And so I was struck by how you have sort of shared that in publicly too, but I also know, reading the book, and it's a novel, that it would not have been created, obviously, without imagination. And you also had to do so many different kinds of research that went beyond your life, right? So I'm curious, because even when Toni Morrison came out with her novel, I think one of the reviews was like, oh, she's giving such a great, like she's a reporter of the Black life, you know, as though she is a mere vehicle or a camera or a tour guide to some exotic land, right? And not an artist. So I guess with that, I had two questions. One was, do people come up to you and say, is this true? Is this your mom? Is this your father? You know, like, do they sort of seek for that accuracy that you talked about earlier? That's one question. And then the other question is, like, how do you negotiate between myth and then at the same time documentation and also autobiography and fiction?
So, okay, thank you for asking that question, because yes, people come and ask me very frequently how much of this is true, how much of this did you imagine, and then I have to remind myself that I left Kathmandu in 1989, which is when the book is actually set, is post-1989. So I wasn't there for any of the things that are actually written in the book. So I left in 1989, I returned in 2000. And so I was gone for all that period that's actually a part of the book. And the period that's before 1989 is centered around this protagonist, Meena, when she was a 14-year-old woman in the 1960s. I wasn't born then. So to call it not a work of imagination would be to take all of the book away. And I think there is something called knowledge that is lived, which you have an experience of without living it physically. So of course I know that we went through, the Andolan. Of course I know that my mom struggled with a few things, but I know it in a more theoretical way because I wasn't there to participate in any of it. So of course, so when people ask me this, I say my book is 95% fiction and 95% fact, like literally in that math. And you can do the math yourself. So I think what I have drawn from life is not events, but I don't know, an imagined experience. You know, I remember knowing that I partly wanted to write about my mother. And when I started writing about her, I am like, I cannot write about her if I don't write about her as a woman who was not my mother. She just became a mother one day, and she was not a mother before that. And so all of that is obviously a part of my imagination. What's probably a little more closer to fact is the setting. Like Sabaila is a real place. And the places I tried to describe as much as I could. But the lives being lived within it, that's imagined.
Yeah.
I don't think you can write even a sentence that's entirely true anyway. In the process of writing, you make it beautiful, and most of the time life is not that beautiful, it's messy. So
no, that's and they say, like that non-fiction, like life can be stranger than fiction, but fiction can be true in the truest sense.
Absolutely.
And so with that, I also teach writing, and some of my students are also writing from memory and childhood. And I think sometimes they worry about how much of it is like they should keep as is, right? And then how much like they can play with. But my question to you is, when you also draw from what you know, how do you protect the people around you or the people you love? Or, are there ways that you make them unidentifiable? Maybe it's a little bit more technical, but how do you sort of, walk that line?
I think I realized as I wrote that I could not write all the things that happen in life. For instance, I have 3 brothers. And in the book, there is just one brother, which meant that one brother is all my brothers and my cousins put together. So there's no way on earth to really make that person become anybody. But I also think for me, storytelling is about the coming together of aesthetics and truth. And I think the aesthetics of it takes care of many things. It takes care of masking people, because if you were to write, I don't know, if you were to document a human being, they wouldn't come off quite the way they do in fiction. And I think just the process of writing fiction helps you mask. I don't know, is that, would you say that?
Yeah, I guess so, yeah. Absolutely.
So I think that, and also fiction is so much more simplified than life. That your characters, no matter how complex you make them, will be simpler than anything they can be in life. And just in that you mask. And then of course you do the technical things of, you don't tell their real name, you give them different cities, and you flat out say, no, this is not you. That's the best way to say that. Is this me? No, it's not you. How could you say that? And I think that masks quite a bit of it. Yeah.
There's that song, no? This song is not about you. Like
it's not about
what
you.
What is that?
You call them egoistic and narcissistic, and you say, how could you think this is you? And that I think that shuts them up.
That's a good one.
That's a good one,
yeah, that's a good one. So let's talk about kingdom of women. I love that phrase. And I don't want to give too much away, but the epilogue ends with a song in which you have used the kingdom of women. And boy, it sounds so magical. I want to go there. I want to climb that tree. I want to sing, dance, eat the food they're eating, speak the language they're speaking. And you write a lot about this love and friendship between girlfriends. And I myself am so interested in that too. And when I read your book, I felt like I found myself in it, you know, in very surprising, unexpected ways. And maybe it's because I identify as a woman. It almost felt like you were writing to me, and I've never met you before. And it almost felt like you had this sly wink for all the women who are reading this or who identify with sort of this friendship, this female friendship. That is actually, I don't know, beyond friendship in many ways too. And maybe not as simple as being labeled as queer or lesbian. Like maybe it defies that label even, right? So can you talk about, you know,
Yeah, so this is the part I get questioned most about. In fact, the book got shortlisted for a queer award, Rainbow Award in India. And so the whole queer community identified the book as a queer book. And that's been interesting for me because that's happened multiple times. People have, and yet when women talk to me about it, they say, but I didn't think it was queer because I have experienced this just in my realm of friendships. But all men have identified it as queer literature, which I find really interesting.
Oh, men.
I grew up in hostels. I grew up surrounded by girls. And for a large part of my life, my girlfriends were my everything. Like, I would die for them. We would draw, literally, we would draw on the walls, within hearts, names of girlfriends. And yet, it wasn't about being queer. It was literally an expression of, that's how much I love you. And I know that every girl out here is nodding. Like, I'm seeing so many girls nod. Because I think this is a very lived experience, especially in societies like ours, where romantic love is a complex thing. It's not something you can very openly engage in. It's not something that's easily accepted. And so we are lovophobic. We are afraid of all kinds of love. It's not that we are afraid just of male-female romance. We are afraid of female romances. We are afraid of male. We're just afraid. We don't like romance. And in a society like that, you still have young men, young girls growing up who are still seeking experiences, who are still seeking pleasure, who are still seeking companionship. But it's sort of, I feel it's so forbidden and it's so complex that I think friendships do kind of fill in that gap till you find, you know, I don't know. That's been my experience in the hostel. I think hostels are strangely erotic places. And I don't know. And now when I think back, I'm like, oh my God, we were high on something. And And it was intense, and there could be heartbreaks, and there could be makeup sessions, and there could be tears that were really intense. And I think we learned to navigate romance amongst ourselves. And I think that's because that's a safe space. It's protected, it's not scrutinized, it's not under surveillance of any kind. As yet, we have not started labeling it. And I think, at least when I was growing up, there was no labeling at all. It made it very safe to actually love somebody.
And that love that you share across 2 generations, Meena, the protagonist, one of the main protagonists, shares that love with her sister-in-law, and they sort of carve out their names, right, on their wrist, and then I think they join it or something.
Yeah, they try to exchange blood and become blood sisters. So.
and then that happens again with Pirti and Sachi, right? And that is intense. It's like, how do I express that I love you so much?
Yeah.
You know?
How do I express I love you so much? Because there's no closure to that. It's not something that's going to culminate into a lifelong companionship. Everybody knows deep down that this is transient and it will end, which makes, I think, friendships that much more dangerous, fragile, emotional, heartbreaking. And how do you express? So in my book, the characters don't have language, so they cut themselves, and they say, "This is how much I love you." And also in Meena's generation, that's also a generation where even friendship was not allowed to women, because you were so confined to the house. So she explores it with what is safe for her sisters, her cousins, and then Preeti, who can step out of the house, explores it with other girls. And I think I have talked to, I used to talk to my mom, and I've talked to my masses, and my brother is standing there. I'm sure he has no clue about this, because women don't tell their men such things. These are very intensely female experiences. But my mom used to tell me about her girlfriends. And I used to be like, wow, and her girlfriends would all come from her set of cousins and her set of relatives. And she had one who was named Bacchi. And I don't know if, did you hear of her ever? Yeah, so he's nodding, he's heard the name. Yeah, so she used to talk about Bacchi, and I could feel it. So that thing came out from there. I don't know if this ever really happened, but yeah. So I don't know.
Thank you. I think the book, I realized, is when I tried to think of like त्यो स्कुलमा भन्छ नि यो किताबको theme के हो and you have to like think about like themes के हो and I was thinking and it has a lot of M words actually: marriage, miscarriage, mental breakdown and mental health, madness, monsters, men, money, monkey,
yes.
myth, lots of myths. And then one thing that you just mentioned, love, right? And I was in a conversation with a Nepali poet, Nibha Shah, and one of the things that she lamented was, she said, this was a couple of years ago, and she said, I was never taught how to love, and that really struck me, like, she was like, they don't teach you that at school. They don't teach you how to love in school. And I was like, that's true. And she was saying, and even in the family, like no one really talks about it, right? And then I began thinking, so where do we learn how to love? And then in your book, there's a lot of Bollywood.
Yes.
And there's Sri Devi. There's that one part where Sri Devi, I'm sure we all know and love her, is a Nagin, right? And she has the money, which is like the most powerful something.
Weapon, I guess,
yeah,
in some
ever.
way. Yeah.
She can teleport. She can kill people. She can read minds. I don't know.
Yeah,
she can do a
everything.
lot.
She, like Superman is no match. No match. She can do everything.
She can do everything.
She can do everything.
And then the one thing that you write here, or maybe it's the narrator who's sharing this, and this is Meena's thoughts, is like, how can Sri Devi, who can do all this, why does she spend her time like dancing for Rishi Kapoor?
Yeah, Rishi Kapoor, yes.
And why is she not using her powers, right? So how did, like, where do we learn to, love? Like, because that's one example is Bollywood. I think we see that so clearly,
Yeah,
and someone
absolutely.
strong like Sridevi. Yeah.
I think for South Asians, Bollywood is the template of love. And that's why you always think that if two flowers come together, you'll get pregnant. It's frightening. But I do think our films really, really craft out the path of love for so many of us because we are not taught. And I do think also that you learn to love if you have good friends. You learn to be careful with them. You learn how to navigate their emotions. You learn how not to hurt them. You learn to fight and not let that fight mean everything is over. So I do think healthy friendships in your young years are great ways to learn how to authentically and carefully love and passionately love, because that's how you are. Because films will tell you very different things about how men love and how women love. Men love with action and women just sit and cry. And that's their expression of love. And it's not true, because women love with action and men love with action. And so, I think it's pretty evident. I'm all about, when you're young, make friends, make all your mistakes with them, have all your heartbreaks with them. It will lead to a healthier life later. You will know how to be friends with your spouses, your partners. I don't know. Does that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
and if and at the same time, there's this another theme of madness, and especially of older women going
Mad.
bat crazy, like really crazy, right? And there's rage. And I found that so striking because, for instance, today I had invited my mom and she's not here. She felt really ill. And one of the things I've thought about is women's pain and how sometimes, I love my dad. Oh, I can't believe I'm talking about them right now. But anyway, I love my dad. But sometimes, he was just like combing the dogs, brushing the dog's hair or something. And my mom was like, oh, I'm in pain. And he's like, yeah, okay, like, And it's not like he doesn't care, but he was like, oh, I'm doing this, I'll get to you soon. So I've been thinking about women's pain not being taken perhaps too seriously. And especially, I've heard so many stories from my own friends, from my seen relatives, of older women kind of losing it. And then people just being like, wow, they're crazy, or they've been possessed, or they're a witch, or, So maybe, can you talk a little bit about madness and monsters within women, maybe?
Well, that part is definitely from life. I think I live in a family of mad women. And it's one of the most tragic things, because I also feel the women who enter my family are strong, intelligent, compassionate, gorgeous, gorgeous women who we drive mad. My aunts have been driven mad by my uncles. My mom was driven mad. Full stop. I have younger women in my family who've gone mad, who are on pills. And it's not just my family. I talk to every second person will tell me, my mom's bat crazy, or my kuni ke kaki is like this, and it's everywhere, but it's completely undiagnosed. It's completely not talked about. It's completely expressed as, आइमाईहरु त यस्तै हुन्छ. Women, what do you do with them? They are an emotional wreck. It's the blame of it, and the casual attitude towards it is destructive. And I think we live in, even our medicine, even our, let's forget our mental health, even our physical health. Women rarely receive physical health treatment. A man will get tired one day and people will say, hey, doctor lai dekhaunu paryo. And you will go to a doctor. A woman will get tired one day, nobody will know she is tired. She will work her way through it. Women work their way through headaches, through period cramps, through depression, through ailments. Women are supposed to die, to live longer than men. I'm yet to find too many women who actually live longer than men in our societies. I think we are horrible to our women. And one of the reasons is I think we don't understand that we force our women into lives of diaspora. They get married, and you cease to belong to your biological family, and you're supposed to just belong to this. And we are a world of arranged marriages. First of all, I think that itself is really difficult because you're uprooting a girl. She rarely has consent in the matter. You have put her in a brand new household. She's supposed to adjust to that household. She is forever an outsider in that house. And she is forever the minority. She is an outsider minority who has no navigation skills because she's often very young. And I think it drives women mad because they have no outlets. And I think that's every other, and I was in the US a couple of months back, and I met a few of my friends who are from South Asia. And one of them, she, it was so casually said because she doesn't recognize what she's saying herself. So she said, she's from Tamil Nadu, so she's Indian, and she was telling me, I was 21 when I got married. I had never seen my husband before. We got married, and we moved straight to America. And when my first child was born, I told my husband, let's go back because I would like to raise my child back home. And my husband said, well, if you want to go, you go, but I'm going to live here. And so then I said, okay. And then, so since then, it's been 35 years. And the casualness with which you can tell a woman that her priorities are nobody's priorities, the casualness with which you can write her life script is one of the things that I find most brutal about our society. I think we do not understand how hard marriage is on women. And especially, I think, marriage without consent. An arranged marriage, 90% of the time, is marriage without consent. And I don't know. So I think we are littered with mad women that we do not talk about. We what is it? What's the expression? Sweep them under the carpet, and that's it. So I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I think in one of the moments when Meena sort of grows increasingly mad, her daughter Pirti sometimes finds her in the balcony sort of smirking, laughing, talking, having a conversation, right? And as a reader, your book, I feel it has myth, folk tales, and then there's the quote-unquote reality of the story that's taking place in whatever you call, like real life, right? Reality of that story. And at the same time, sometimes the myths start, and then I don't know when they end. Sometimes it's part of, symbolically a part of the character's life. And sometimes when Meena is off, I feel like, like maybe she's in that folk tale world, maybe she's up in that tree. Maybe she's smiling and having a good time, right? Can you speak a little bit about sort of, I guess, like that escape? I don't know if folk tales are an escape. I think here you use it as an escape, but also meaning making, right? And also origin stories. In the case of Janakpur, you had this beautiful story, and also Pashupatinath, you had a very interesting story. But I've also heard that you've created some of these myths too. So can you maybe speak a little bit about the myths and the songs in this book?
That was my favorite part of the book. I loved, if I felt I had created something that sounded mythical, and if people told me, oh my God, I have never heard of this before, I'm like, that's because it didn't exist. And that was the cool moment in my life. I really enjoyed that. But also, my mom's from Darbhanga, which is the Mithila belt of India, and my father is from Janakpur, which is the Mithila belt of Nepal. And Mithila people are creative people. We are storytellers. We are mural makers. The Madhubani art comes from there. And art is a very integral part of our life. And our marriages are, when not done stingily, there are some really badly done marriages, but when done well, it is the most fun experience because it's full of songs. And for every occasion, the women will sit down, they have this thing called dholak, and they will put the dholak under their thighs and they'll beat at it, and they will begin the most raunchy, horribly embarrassing songs that'll make your ears burn, and you're like, you can't say that in public. And it's extremely, extremely A-grade and, not R-rated at all. And when I was writing the book, the Mithila belt is also known mostly as the oppressive belt. There is some truth to that. I will not deny that. But it's also, amongst women, there is a very strange kind of an energy that exists with the singing and the storytelling and the Mithila art making. My mom could not hold a tune, but she would sing. She was a lusty singer, and she would sing these absolutely not okay songs. And so I put all the songs in. But the problem is that I was writing this, and I didn't have, my mom had already passed away by the time I started writing the book, and I didn't know any of the lyrics. So I had to make up all the lyrics. I had so much fun doing that. And the raunchier I could get it to be, the prouder I was of myself. And so that's where the songs come from. Also, the myths, of course, if you live in Kathmandu, you live with myths. Pashupati kahabata aako euta gai thyo, somebody will tell you, and it will begin there. Nobody will tell you kun rajale kaile banako, nobody's interested, right? Buddha Nilkantha kasari aako, 5 jana kisanले खनिरहेको थियो. I'm sure none of that really happened. It's ani ragat ayo, ani yeso herda naak bhaचेको थियो. Seriously, ragat ayo, naak bhaचेको थियो. That's not going to happen. But those stories are really the truth of at least for me, that's the only story. I don't know the actual history of any of these places. I only know these imagined origin tales, as you spoke of. So I was setting the book in Kathmandu. I said, you cannot write about Kathmandu without writing about its temples. You cannot write about its temples without talking about the myths behind it. And so that's where the myths came. And then there were others that I was like, you know what, I can tell better stories than those who told it for millions of years, and so then I made some. And the prologue and the epilogue, the two that you said you liked, are the ones that I created because they don't really exist, and I'm very proud of them. Yeah.
Nice. I was going to actually leave the reading till the end, but I think maybe now is an okay time for you to read the prologue, and then...
You're the boss.
What do you think?
Whatever
like a
you
short
say.
reading? Yeah, let's so that everyone can get a taste of the book, and then we can continue a little bit more and then open up for Q&A. So yeah, maybe if you could read us something.
Yeah, maybe the prologue, because
Sure.
it's short and it's self-contained and it has the myth that I created. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So the prologue and the epilogue both are called The Woman Who Climbed Trees. That's where the book gets its name from. So I'll just read the prologue because it's short. Okay. A man had 2 children, and one day his wife died. So the man went looking for another wife, but no woman would be burdened by the children, and the man remained unmarried for some years. Can you all hear me at the back? Yeah? Sorry. Then, nobody would be, and the man remained unmarried for some years. Then one day the man went to a neighboring village for some work and heard of a family that had a girl of marriageable age. After he had finished his work, the man went up to the family's house and made inquiries about the girl's age, color, and robustness. Satisfied, he offered himself as a groom. He had wealth, he said, and lots of youth left in him. He would take care of the girl, and the girl would take care of the children. Show me the children, the girl said, and the man brought his children with him during his next visit. When the girl looked at the children, she fell in love with them. They were good children, shy and calm. They had beautiful, sad eyes, like those of orphans, and they tugged at her heart, and so the girl married the man. For many years, the girl was mother to the sad-eyed children, and eventually their eyes began to glow with joy. They learned mischief, learned songs and dances, played in the fields. They learned to chase after carts and birds. Eventually, they forgot their birth mother and thought of the girl as their real mother. They grew up well, two handsome children. One night, the man could not sleep. It was a moon-filled night, and the rays fell silver upon his wife. The tree outside knocked at the window, quiet and musical. The man stayed up, enjoying the night, and when, around an hour after midnight, his wife pushed aside the covers and stepped off the bed, the man was surprised. The girl put on her slippers. She made her way out of the room and toward the front door. She stepped out of the house and disappeared. The man stayed behind, confused. The girl returned with the early hours. She did the same the next day, and then the day after. The man was very disturbed by his wife's behavior and decided to follow her. One night, after much thought, he tied a thread to the tip of his wife's hair and held the spool in his hand. When she left the bed, the thread on the spool began to unwind and started a white path behind her. After a good interval had passed, the man followed the thread path. The thread went down the lane that crossed the fields and a cluster of huts. It went past the bazaar, past the temple, and followed the river. It stopped by a large peepal tree and climbed its bark. The man was puzzled. What could this mean? Why had the thread climbed the tree? He looked up, and sure enough, there was his wife, up on the tree, sitting on its branches, enjoying the wind and the stars. The man hid himself behind some bushes, and when he saw his wife readying to leave, he rushed back home. For a month after that, he followed her every night, and every night the girl climbed the tree and sat on the branches. Her feet dangled under her sari. Some nights she let down her hair, and her hair fell like a waterfall upon her back. The girl was beautiful, and the man was severely in love with her. But despite all this, he was also tormented. What could this mean? What could this mean? Finally, he began to talk about his wife with others. He told his friends, his sisters-in-law, his brothers. Word spread. Ah, said the people, she must be having an affair. But after many nights of watching the tree, it was clear that there was no affair. She must be mad, said others. But all day the girl worked with such surety and skill that insanity had to be ruled out. Then someone said, she must be a witch. Think of it, said someone. We cannot understand anything she does. Why did she marry this man, someone so much older than her? Why did she choose not to have her own children and raise somebody else's? Why do these children love her so? Why does she look more beautiful at night than in the morning? Why does she sit high in a tree? Nobody could answer. The man thought hard about it and decided it was time to let the children know. She does not love you, he said. She is a witch. That's not true, cried the children. She loves us. She feeds us sweets, stitches our clothes, gives us baths, sends us to school, strokes our hair until we fall asleep, and sings in our sleep so we dream sweet. She loves us. Does she? Said the man. Come with me and I will show you. So he took the children along the next night and showed them the girl. She was upon the branches, light as a bird, her hair blowing in the wind, her skin without wrinkles. Now, said the man, is that a woman or is that a witch? The children stared. They had never seen their mother so lovely, so without worry, so far away, as though she cared nothing for them or for anything they knew. She is a witch, they said, and returned home with their father. The next night, the man, the children, the friends, the sisters-in-law, the brothers, and the elders of the village surprised the wife by springing out of the bushes. When the wife fell off the branch, they gave her a good beating. The wife stared at the husband and said nothing. But when she saw her children, she began to weep. "Save me! Save me!" she cried. But the children, who had never seen their mother look so beautiful, could not step forward. They looked away and stared into the distance in fear. They pushed their fingers into their ears so they would not hear her scream. Then the villagers carried her to the river. The children stared into the distance. They kept their fingers in their ear and did not hear their mother thrashing under the water, nor did they hear the silence when it came.
It's a ghost story. It's scary too, and very sad, and at the same time about even her desire, right, and her beauty. She's not allowed that in some ways.
Yeah, and she's perfect. Like, she does everything that's supposed to be done. All she's saying is a couple of hours of leisure, I suppose, in a place that's of her choice. And so, I don't know. And also, I think we also live in a space where she is a witch is a very, very common way of getting rid of women. Right? So, and that's historically been the case, that you don't agree with it, you declare her a witch, and it's done. You know, metaphorically too. So.
One of the things that is very striking in the book is your language. It's almost a character in itself, and I found out that you are also a poet. And although you don't claim to be, and you taught poetry, you're also a translator, right? You translate works from
Maithili to English.
Maithili to English. Do you do it the other way around? Okay.
I don't have enough proficiency, sadly.
Okay. Yeah. And I've always felt that when poets sort of write novels, they're so precise with language. And when translators write novels, they are both unapologetic, but also kind at the same time. Can you speak a little bit about these other identities and maybe, you know, as a translator and being a poet, but also a novelist, did that help, or did that, you know?
Yeah, I am a little afraid of calling myself a poet. I haven't done poetry in a really long time. But I did start off wanting to write poetry and writing poetry. And I keep telling myself that I must do poetry, even if it is as an exercise, because as you said, poets really understand language. And for me, writing is about getting the language. I love getting the right, what I think is right. I don't know whether it comes off that way or not, but I really, really enjoy playing with language. What translation has given to me is the realization that every language is unique and quirky. When you start like scratching it, all languages are so quirky. They have weird rules. They have words that cannot be translated. I love swear words in every language. I think they are the powerhouse of every language, just swear words. And, you know, Maithili has some of the weirdest swear words, like, I'm sorry, excuse my language. Anybody I'm sorry, we have underage kids here, so we shall let it be. But Maithili has some really weird swear words. And when I was writing the book, I was writing Maithili speaking characters, and I was translating that into English. And so I was struck by how, you know, in English, you don't hear people actually going around saying, donkey, do this. But in Nepali, kasto gadha मान्छे होला, right? Ani kasto ani in Hindi, you know, people will say, ek number ki chudail hai. Who the hell speaks like that in English? Nobody speaks like that in English. And so when I was translating, I did not want to lose that. So I translated all of it as is. And so my main character calls everything a donkey. Like a bench is a donkey, a chair is a donkey. And that's because I think, kasto gadha jaste yahi basiracha. Everything is gadha, everything is, pagal. And so it was, I think translation has given me that. And I translate because I know I will then learn more of these things. And storytelling in every language is different. If you stick to English, then after some time you're writing versions of Once Upon a Time There Was a King and other sentences that sound similar. But every other language does it differently, and I think that's the prologue I just read is something that in my head is very, very inspired by Maithili style of telling stories. And so I think that's what it's given me. I think, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm partly asking this question. I think some of my students also want to know this. But now that you've created this book, right? What was the process of sort of book making, like turning all of this into an actual book? But then before that, when you were talking about translation, like, were there certain things that you were afraid of, like trespassing or getting it quote unquote wrong? And did you have some sort of an audience in your head? And I know we talk a lot about audience in the MFA circle and all of that, but I think that also comes at some point in writing, and maybe it's good if it doesn't. So I guess, were you anxious or, afraid of anything with the novel? Because as you said, it does take place in a city that exists, right? Yeah. And in Nepali literature, or with Nepali characters, our last name socially says so much about, like, maybe where they could be from, or what they would look like, or what like the existing stereotypes of those people are, right? So I was very piqued when you had Gurung characters. I was like, So anyway, so were you? I guess you? Was there anything that you were afraid of?
I was really afraid that the audience would begin to interfere. That, I think, was my biggest fear. I'm like, an audience is going to crop up in my head one day and is going to interfere. But luckily for me, I didn't know I was writing a book, and I didn't think it would ever get published, because I have really talented friends who are still struggling to get published, so I didn't think this was going to happen to me. So it all continues to feel extremely magical and surprising, and oh no, is this a dream kind of a thing? So even when I was writing, I think I wrote with no conviction of that it would see the light of day. And I'm really happy that that happened, because it meant it kind of freed me from audience. Also, I started writing this book because my mom passed away, and I missed her, and I didn't know what to do with that emotion. So I started writing a journal to have a conversation with her. And so for almost 4 years of the book, I was only journaling. So I wasn't writing a book. I was just talking to her. She was my audience. And I think because I started off with her as my audience, she remained my audience till the last day. And so every time I wrote, I would be, did I do justice to you? And that was my only thing. The only person I was concerned with was, did I do justice to you? And that's been it. My fear has begun after the publication. After the book got accepted for publication, all the fears came. I'm like, oh my God, people will read it. A Gurung will read it and say, Gurungs are not like this. And I will have to respond to that. And my bigger fear is that now that I want to write another book, I'm afraid that I will not be sort of virgin in my landscape. I will have an audience in mind. I think all that you're talking about is going to start now. It didn't happen in my first one because I didn't know I was writing a book. You asked me the process of
making the book.
Making the book. I had no process. I gave it to a friend because a friend very audaciously and cheekily sent me his really boring PhD thesis. And I got really pissed with him, and I said, I will not read your thesis if you don't read equal number of pages that I have written. And I sent him the book as revenge. And he wrote back and he said, babe, this is a novel. And so that's how I knew it was a novel. It was because somebody else told me I had to stop writing. Because otherwise I would have written 9 more 100 pages, and that's it. I didn't, and I think that was really interesting to me, because I said, but it's not complete. And he said, yes, it is. And then he showed me how it was complete. I still haven't read his PhD thesis. So I don't know, I feel a little bit like I'm going to go to hell for this, but yeah. But it was interesting that somebody else had to tell me that. And I think that's because I didn't start off with the project of writing a novel.
So the recipe to write a novel is to don't start off thinking you're going to write a novel, right?
Yesterday,
and share with friends.
Yeah, Prati's uncle was telling me that he would love to write, but he has so many thoughts in his head and he doesn't know where to begin. I said, just put them down haphazardly. They will find their way together when they have to find it, because I think that's what happened with mine. So I didn't write it in a chronological order. I think the first chapter I wrote was something that comes 100 pages into the book. And that's because I didn't know. And I'm so glad. But the problem is, for the next book, I actually know, and now it's terrible. It's just really bad.
Thank you so much for being here, for making that time. Thank you, Pratibha, for twisting her arm and having her come here so that everyone can celebrate this lovely book that deserves celebration, and celebrate you and your homecoming. If you don't mind, we can do... I'm sorry we didn't do the whole wrapping of books. Waste of paper. So if you don't mind, I'm going to invite your girlfriend, Pratibha, to come here with us, and we can just sort of, quote-unquote, reveal the book, and then the party shall begin, and you will start book signing and etc. So thank you so much.
Before you wrap it up, I want to thank you for this. You've been the most generous organizer and host. For the last 2 weeks, they've been working so hard. I've been so nervous. I'm like, oh man, I better watch my WhatsApp and say something at least once a day, because so much was happening. I know how much hard work goes into stuff like this. Thank you.
Yeah, and
thank you, Prati.
Yeah,
and thank you, Pravin.
Thank you, Pravin. Thank you, Rupak,
Bhushan.
Sagar, Bhushan, Manish, for being here and making it possible.
And thank you, all of you.
Okay, the book is out.